Sit. So I'm traveling with Father Justin Havens. Look how tired we are. Making our way to Frankfurt, Germany. And now we're in Bulgaria, Sofia. There's a little Bulgarian church. That's the family that we married. Her name is Danica. That's her father, Theodore. That's her husband, Denislav. So they're both named Denny. They live on, he's a farmer, but they have 4 acres. They grow all their own crops, their own animals. He butchers everything. He cures everything. We ate more tomatoes than you can imagine. There's my buddy. That's the Bulgarian flag. See that 50-foot cross over the village? That's a little chapel by the cross. A lot of cities have these crosses over them in Bulgaria. That's St. Paraskevi Church, a little church. They haven't had a priest there for about 15 years. He died and they haven't been able to replace him, so it's kind of sad. It's a nice little church. The seedy and wooden benches, so that's how they sit. Those are people that have passed away, so every family posts those on their house. There's a typical shower next to the toilet. That's how things are in Europe. That's the Danube River, that's Romania across the river. And that's the wedding that we did with Denny and Denny. That's a Bulgarian custom. You break the bread, and whoever gets the largest piece of bread rules the house. So the man in this case got the biggest piece of bread. That's beer. Lots of beer in Bulgaria, believe me. Rolling hills with the Danube River in the back. That's where we stayed. We have a little place in a village called Petrakarasa. Again, there's the bathroom where everything's just self-contained. There's the village rooftops. No security, nobody ever steals anything. Kids play out till 2 in the morning. And the parents never worry about them. Here's a church we served in, St. Nectario's Church. Well, these are people on the trip. These are all pilgrims. And this is just a little village church. Now that fellow on the right is a missionary to Malawi. That's his family. They have 25 priests. They've baptized 7,000 people in the last few years. He said the priests, 20 of the 25 get up at 2 in the morning and spend 2 hours in prayer. Okay, now we're coming to a monastery. This is St. Arsenios Monastery, and it's the village of Vatopedi. Even though it's a Vatopedi monastery, look at this iconography. It's just unbelievable. We had a lecture here from a fellow named Father Arsenios, who was very, very pious. And see him there? Here's what he said. The key to the spiritual life is to maintain the schedule, to keep your rule of prayer no matter what. That whole chapel was a baptismal chapel there. Now we're driving along the road. This is the monastery of St. John the Theologian, where St. Paisios is buried. That is me. Yep. Father Justin. They have 70 to 80 nuns here, and it's really incredible when you hear them sing. That's his grave there, so this line is unending.
Father, do they allow you to take some soil from the grave?
You have to kind of sneak it.
You can sneak it.
That was Father Selengides who gave us a lecture. He was a very traditional professor. This is another monastery, Holy Ascension Monastery. There's relics, obviously. See what I mean about they're everywhere there. That's what I want to do in the front of our church. That is the abbess. She is Euronissa Anicia. She's been a nun for 60 years. She's about 4'10". She read The Way of a Pilgrim in 1957. It changed her whole life and she became a nun. Elder Ephraim took over this monastery. He became the spiritual father of this monastery in 1974. And they started with 3 nuns, and now they have about 30 nuns in this monastery. It's just really... This is the only chapel in the world dedicated to Elder Joseph the Hezekiah. That's it right there.
So, Father, you're in Greece at this point? Or is this
We're in Greece. Yep, we're in Greece. Yep, that's our driver, our taxi driver. He was a good guy. Okay, now we're heading to another monastery. This is the monastery of St. George of Drama. Yes. Father George, there's his relics. That's an icon of him to the right, one in the back. That's the chapel where he served. That's his cell right there. So they left his cell untouched. That's his little study. Now this, let me look at this. Yeah, this is where this is St. Acalina. So Anne Robinson Saint. And we drove by in the road and they go, there's Sister Acalina's house. I go, or St. Acalina. I go, what? So they jammed the brakes on. I ran over there and took all these pictures of where she grew up. This is Father Theodore Zisis, who is a very outspoken critic of the Council of Crete. I took a picture with him because we were reading his book in our Thursday study group. He's 77 years old. There's his son, Seraphim. I'll tell you a quick story. By accident, he shot his sister when she was 5 years old, and she died, and so he could never become a monk, a priest. He only could become a monk. Isn't that interesting? Okay, here we are, Meteora. Imagine living in these rock formations before the monasteries were ever built. People lived in caves. So this is St. Nicholas. There's a really steep climb up to this monastery. It was shocking how many tourists were here. And I don't mean pilgrims, I mean tourists. So it was a little... now this thing lifts out of the ground. It carries stuff all the way up. In the old days, they pulled it by hand. This is one of the chapels. You couldn't take too many pictures. I had to sort of get permission, and that's looking down upon the village. People lived in those rocks, those caves up there. Father Justin was so sick he couldn't go on this trip, believe it or not. That is me. That's looking down. Okay, St. Barbara Monastery. You notice it said they're basically open from 9 to 5. So all the sisters or the brothers hide out during those periods, and then they come and do their services after 5 o'clock.
How do you get up here? Is there like a...
You can walk. No, you walk. Yeah. And you walk, and you walk, and you walk.
You know, Father David, I visited there in '94. You should mention that because these monasteries were up on the formations, they're one of the only churches that weren't sacked by invading armies.
Yeah, exactly.
They date back from like the 7th and 8th centuries.
See these martyrs? The narthex is filled, I mean solid, with pictures of martyrs. It was really very fascinating to me. Here's one of the chapels. This is a very nice monk who gave us a tour. The Last Judgment. That's where they read during trapeza. During the meal, everybody's silent, and one of the monks reads from the lives of the saints. That's just the trapeza. Can you imagine that? These are Old Testament scenes. This is St. Stephanos Monastery. This is the only women's monastery in Meteora. There's 5 men's monasteries and 1 women's monastery. Saint Simeon, the stylite. That's in the narthex of the main church. That's the main church. Said it took them 20 years to haul the stones up to build these things. This women's monastery was the women were very nice. They gave us a wonderful tour. And the nun that gave us a tour was Sister Silawani, who was from Australia. And her mom sent her to England as a relic to get her act together. And she discovered Orthodoxy and eventually became a nun. She got her act together. Last Judgment. More martyrs. Arms being cut off. Skin being flayed. St. Gregory Palamas. That's one of the ecumenical councils. This is Meteora. No, not on Mount Athos yet. Yeah, you can go here. It was boiling hot when we went here, I'm telling you. These are old, ancient vestments, about 300-400 years old. Ancient epitafios. That's Sister Silawani there who gave us the tour. Ancient manuscripts. Those things probably weigh about 10,000 pounds, those heavy. Yeah. That's a new chapel, and they said they didn't get any permission to build it, so that's how they roll in Greece. Yeah. That's the son and daughter of the tour leader, Father Peter Hears. This is an old church. This is in a village near where we were staying. Church is 1,100 years old, and there was a fire in there, so now they're meeting in this fellowship hall. This is a really great priest, just a nice village priest. But I want to show you something here in a second. Look for this. That pillar is 1,600 years old, just to give you some perspective. It's the Sidi, this is Saint Ephthemios the New. That was his part of his vestment that he wore. That's him, Saint Ephthemios the New. That fellow is Paniotis. He's the head of the Orthodox Heritage magazine. So if you get that, here's a water blessing. The town, the village gathered together. This is Father Peter's chapel in his home. Pretty nice, huh? Yeah. A little chanter stand. That's where you get your, that's Father Justin. That's where you get your passport. You can't go on Mount Athos unless you have a passport. There's where you get your tickets to go to the boat. There's the boat. The Action Estine is truly meet. So the trucks get on the bottom part. Now there's Mount Athos. First time I went here, we never did see the peak until the last day. It was covered with clouds, but this time it was sunny. So the front of the boat opens up. It lets itself down on these concrete piers. People come and go. Trucks and cars come and go. Mostly trucks. That's one of the typical monasteries. You see a crane there because they're still doing some remodeling. They all have towers like that because they had pirates that invaded them.
How far along are the ribbons and water restoration? How far along?
Pretty far, really. So none of this was done. In 2005, that's St. Pantaleon's. This has all been finished since 2005. So I was shocked to see the progress that they made. That's where you're getting ready to get off the boat. You just line up, and that's the St. Anna. That goes to the other end of Mount Athos. That's the bus you hop on to go to the capital city. So the port is Daphne. This is the Action Estine Church, where the Action Estine icon, there's a Samaritan woman. I think that's a good idea for our windows in the church, so that's why I snapped that. That's the church. And that was totally covered with metal roofing because it was sinking when I was in 2005, and they restored the whole thing. That's the main town of Cariez. That's a Rocor priest that traveled with us. This is St. Andrew. This was not open when I was here the last time. It's the largest Catholicon, the largest church on Mount Athos. However, this place had bed bugs. I'd never seen a bed bug. And so that was, see how it's still a lot of disrepair here. That's Mount Athos in the background. He miraculously appeared. That's the only part of the roads that's paved, by the way. Everything else is dirt. So that's the complex of St. Andrew. That's the mini church. That's just a little church. And there's the big one. And it is gigantic. That's a chapel. This is Kutlubaciu Monastery. I'd never been here before. This is on the way to this, St. Paisios' house. So St. Paisios lived here, and those are the famous logs that people sat on when he talked with them. That's his stacidi. Nobody can sit there. That's his cassock. Look at that humble little chapel. That's where he worshipped. Now we met an elder here, and this is the elder that said to us, Elder Gabriel, a priest has to lead with a flute, not with a stick. You have to be kind, right? There's St. Paisios here. It's another monastery. We had a lecture from the abbot in this monastery. A lot of them didn't want their pictures taken, so that's why I couldn't do that. Look at that, it's just a chapel. More martyrs. Here's the main church. Now we're sitting out in the deck. Isn't that awesome? Yeah. This is Philotheo Monastery. So this is where Elder Ephraim is from. He was the abbot here for 17 years before he went to Arizona. And this is where like Sithios was from here. That's the main church. That's the main church. This church is about 700 years old. That's the main entrance to the monastery. And they have gates that they close. That's looking on the Aegean Sea there from the top of the monastery. This is another little monastery we went to. We had a lecture here from one of the elders as well. There's a typical grave. This guy is Father Matthew Suela. I met him by chance. I knew he was an American the way he looked, and he's from the church in Portland, St. John. That's Simona Petra. That's that famous monastery way up on the cliff, about 800 feet up. Obviously, so pirates didn't get to them. This is Gregorio Monastery. I had not been here, so this was a new experience for me. Yeah.
Oh my goodness.
That's the main church. Those are cells behind it. Probably ring a bell. No, he's from Simona Petra. See those closed? I was kind of right there. That's where we stayed, that room. Close to that anyway. The Sementron, so they hammer that when the services are to begin. They ring that when the services are going to begin. This is kind of a pretty monastery. I really was quite impressed with this. Yeah, grapevines. Those gates, when they close and you're outside, they don't let you in. So you got to be inside by 7 p.m. So you can see it's a little scraggly, right? I mean, Mount Athos isn't lush green like you'd think for the state of Washington. It's pretty dry. That's the trapeza. This fellow knew our elder. We both have the same spiritual father. This guy on the right is the abbot of that monastery. He's also one of the most renowned experts in the world on monophysites. So he's just getting ready to release a 500-page book on the problem with being a monophysite. Those are jellyfish. They're all over the place. Yeah. That's Dionisio Monastery. That's St. Paul Monastery. That's where the patriarch of Antioch lived here for several years. You know, it doesn't look like it's very far. I'm telling you, that was a killer hike to get there. Oh my God. That's where Father Peter Heers was baptized, that spot right there. This is New Skeet. I had walked to New Skeet. There's some donkeys, but I'd never taken the boat here. So this was really one of our best experiences. We went to a skeet, this Father Paisios, and he has 3 brothers there. None of them are priest monks, so they all have to go to one of these other little chapels on Sundays to do their services.
Have you got solar power?
Some of them, yeah, a lot of solar. They inherited this 200-year-old iconostas. That's one of the main churches that the other monks go to on Sunday for the services. There's another one. More skeets. So there's maybe like 3 to 10 people in each of these skeets. There's Elder Joseph the Hezekiah's grave. He died on Dormition in 1959. Here's where Elder Joseph lived with Elder Ephraim and Elder Arsenios. There's the chapel they built for his grave. His relics aren't here anymore, of course. They exhumed them. That's St. Paul Monastery. So behind is Mount Athos. It's the closest monastery to Mount Athos on the Holy Mountain. That's the main entrance. That's a little chapel. That's the main church. They're bringing relics out there for people to venerate. That's their trapeza. Mount Athos. Mount Athos. The cruise gave me that. Oh, there's a Turkish toilet, just so you know what it looks like. That's how you go, right there. Yep. This is Zeropatamu Monastery, and we were able to serve the Dormition here. I'd never served in a Mount Athos church, so that was a great blessing. That's looking back towards the port. There's one of the boats coming up, the Aksionistine. We're making our way down to the big Russian monastery. There's only one Russian monastery on Mount Athos, and it's humongous. It's St. Pantalemon's, and it's distinct because it has a green roof. Some old duffer. A relic. Yeah. There's St. Pantalemon's Monastery. They had 1 million relics here. It was unbelievable. All the Russian saints, St. Silouan, St. John of Kronstadt. They wouldn't let me take that's the narthex. These are Russians, and the 2 guys in the middle, and they told us, we love Americans. I said, well, we love Russians, so we're equal. That's St. Pantaleon, some of the grounds. Little chapel. Okay, this is just a couple shots from a museum in this Greek village. There's an old ancient cross for a seal. They worked by hand, right? It was really a hard scrabble life for these guys. There's an old still. They made ouzo. Yep. Plow horses, plow donkeys. There's what the women would typically wear to church. That's an ancient candle stand. No sand, so they stuck your candle on this. That's held wine, it's a wine flask. That's the church in the village, St. Nectarios. Now we're in Bulgaria. This is one of the coolest things. I didn't anticipate experiencing this. We just stayed here one night. This is no big deal. It's just a little motel where this couple we married. They took us to Greece, they brought us back. There's a typical bathroom again, everything's contained in one room. There's the happy wedding couple back from their honeymoon. Okay, this is St. John of Rila Monastery. This is the biggest, most beautiful monastery in Bulgaria. There were some pilgrims here and there were a lot of tourists here as well, but look at the size of this thing. Yep. Not many. Only a handful, actually. That's where they read the gospel on Sunday mornings. There's a chapel. There's monk cells. That's all stonework. It's not paint. It's just incredible. Yeah. I took a lot of these because I just thought it was so striking. But this is not where St. John of Rila lived. So now we're going to go to where St. John of Rila, look how giant that is to cook for all the monks that were there. And this is in the middle of nowhere. So I try to imagine what it was like back in the 1300s. Now we're going to where St. John of Rila actually lived. He lived in a cave. Now we're going up the steps to the cave. They put icons there, but that was his bed. It was just a rock formation that he slept on. Now we're going farther up in the cave. Farther up.
Need steps?
Oh yeah, it's huge. He probably cooked up here and the smoke came out of here if he was to cook something. He had a water source. Obviously they made a little monument to it now, but he did have water nearby. That's where his relics were originally kept. That's a little chapel. None of this was here when he was here now. He worshipped in the cave, but they built this over where his relics were. Yep, because they're holy.
Is that place damaged or something?
They're repairing it. This is St. Alexander Nevsky Cathedral. It's one of the largest churches in the world. It's in Sofia, Bulgaria. St. Andrew, that's our patron. One of the largest. That's all the seating there is. Just a few benches, and it probably seats 6,000 people in there, or stands 6,000 people. The patriarch was there that day. We just missed him. There's a Russian church about 2 blocks away, and they were finishing up a service when we went there, so it was really quite beautiful. Look at the size of that thing, yeah. Yeah, now here's where the Mays lived, right there. Now we're in Kodiak. That's Stephen's view right there. Stephen lives right across the street. There's Father Paisios. So he was baking bread this day. This is looking down on Kodiak from the top of the hill. And I hit the jackpot with weather. It was sunny every day. Yeah. Stephen said eagles up here are like seagulls down here. There are eagles everywhere. So So this is from the other end of Kodiak. I went around the cove. I want to take pictures. It's very, other than the city, it's pretty undeveloped.
You see a bear?
I looked for bear, but I didn't see any. The largest Coast Guard base in the world. They have 3,000 Coast Guard. There's our deacon that was down here. Yeah.
He's gonna get ordained soon, Father.
Yeah, he's going to get ordained in this country.
There's a Kodiak bear. That's a friendly one. There's a mean one. Yeah. Those
smiling.
otters. The samovars that the Russians use for tea. There's an upside down kayak. Those are the blue beads that they kind of trick the natives out of their land with those blue beads. Those are made by deer skin and sea otter. So they used everything they had. There's the church. It's a cathedral, although it doesn't look like much of a cathedral. The altar. There's the relics of St. Herman are there. There's his hat. Those are the chains he wore on the left. His bones are in there, some of them. So there's the church. It's not spectacular. It's pretty humble. There's the, when you get oil, that's where it's burned over his relics. Yeah, this is at the academy. Looking out the window. Now we're heading over to Spruce Island. And the water, sometimes it's terrible. It was just nice. Our whole trip was kelp everywhere. So what happened when we went to Spruce Island, it's the lowest tide that Father Paisios has ever seen in all the years he's lived there. It was so low that we couldn't land. So we had to go to another island and come back to Spruce Island later. So we'll come back to this. We tried to get in here and we couldn't do it. So now we're heading to Neelis Island where there are 5 nuns. That's a famous rock called Monk's Rock. It's kind of a navigational point in the old days. And there's a coffee shop run by the academy called Monk's Rock in Kodiak. This little island we're going to, you see those structures right there. It's a 55-acre island that these nuns got. The one on the left is where they live now. The big one on the right is what they're building. And I mean, I don't know many men that live a harder life than these 5 nuns. It is shocking to me. They have a very short growing season. They have to grow their own food. It's super windy. It's rainy. There's their chapel right now. That's the only building that was there. An old Fox, a fur trader, had built this building. There's the new building they're building. That's the main guy that's kind of ramrodding the whole thing. That's going to be the new chapel. There's a cell if you think about becoming a nun. One of them actually sleeps there once in a while. Probably not in the winter, but that's how close they are to the water, the chapel. There's Mother Nina, who's the abbess. That's the new chapel they want to build over at the men's monastery on Spruce Island. There's they grow their own veggies, and they said that plastic blows off every year with these windstorms. Now we're heading to Spruce Island. Gonna get another shot. We made it. That building in the background was built illegally, and it's going to be torn down sooner rather than later. This is what St. Herman saw right here. This is really very unspoiled from the time he was here. There was a priest named Father Gerasim Schmaltz who came and lived here because he wanted to preserve the memory of St. Herman because he'd sort of been forgotten. And he died in 1969. There's his bed, his cell. his little chapel in his cell, little church. Now we're going to where they buried him, and they eventually built a church over where his original grave was. That's the iconostas behind me, interestingly enough. That's where his relics used to be, and that covered his relics for many years. There's the altar, pretty simple. I showed you earlier. That's the iconostas there. That's where his relics used to be. There's where he was buried. So you can go underneath this church through this opening right there, and you can get some dirt and you can venerate the spot where he was buried. Some of my traveling buddies. That's where his water source was. That's what he saw, minus that skip. This was what St. Herman would have seen. They replicated his chapel. It was that size there. Little altar. Imagine nobody's here now, right? There, he slept here in an earthen cave. Now we're heading home. We're departing. That is actually Neelis Island there. There's Father's wife, Matushka Mary. There's the group. That's Kodiak. It's an archipelago, so it's got a lot of little islands scrunched in there. There's Papa Frem. We flew back together. He's up at Neelis Island now.